This is Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance in Washington, D.C. Today we are joined by Marsha Blackburn. She is a member of the United States Congress. And it seems like bipartisanship is breaking out in the halls of Congress. We recently saw that the Republicans and Democrats got together on Medicare reform, dealing with the doctor fix, and now here's another example, 21st century cures.
That's right.
Talk to us about this bill, which kind of brings together a series of initiatives together.
It does bring together a series of initiatives, and it's all focused on patient-centered healthcare and more positive outcomes for those patients. And this is what we did at Energy and Commerce Committee and our Healthcare Subcommittee. What we did was to look at what was happening in healthcare and look at what are the inhibitors to innovation. And there were a few things that we found out. Nothing was partisan, and you could look.
How did that happen?
Because we were talking to constituents. And what we heard, regardless of whether someone was Democrat or Republican, was, you know what, the FDA, they really need to be reformed because they are a barrier to entry for new pharmaceuticals and therapies and innovations. You know, the NIH, we can't get them to look at rare diseases. Hey, what we're hearing from our pediatric research is that the NIH is not involving pediatric patients in much of this process. You know, there's this whole new category of medical technology out here and apps, and the FDA wants to look at these mobile health apps, mHealth apps, as medical devices, but guess what? They're not.
They're not.
So we were hearing all of these things, and we said, you know what, let's solve some of these problems. So we agreed that yes, the FDA needed reform, the NIH needed a refocus, and we needed to modernize the way innovation was coming to the marketplace. And we have a history of doing that. When you look at what happened in the 30s, we classified what is a drug and a pharmaceutical. The 70s, we did medical devices. Lots of people now, hips and knees, hearts, implants, etc. So we said, okay, in the early 2000s, let's go on and classify what is health technology and say, FDA, you can go here in health technology, high-risk things like implants, but no, all of these mHealth apps, there are 97,000 in the marketplace now.
I did not know that.
97,000.
Wow.
You can't get into monitoring Fitbits and calorie counters and blood pressure measurements and all of these things that are enablers to people taking control of their health care. So there was bipartisan agreement on that, and the Software Act, which handles medical technology. Congressman Gene Green has been my partner in working on that for 3 years, believe it or not, and we're finally getting to the point that we have legislation, and it is also a part of 21st century cures.
What about this whole notion of right to try, like you described, these orphan diseases where there's not a lot of research because there's not a lot of people inflicted, and so the drug companies aren't really looking to develop cures. But if someone wants to at least give it a shot, is that part of 21st century
That
cures?
is not a part of 21st century cures, but the Right to Try initiative is moving primarily at the states. And Tennessee is one of those states that took that up and allowed that. Now, backing up a bit, it's not that the biotherapies or the pharmaceutical companies don't want to innovate in that space. It is just that they're rare, and you're going to spend $1 billion to bring a drug, and if the FDA will not allow, then you have a barrier to entry. But here's what's happening in medicine as a whole. We have a movement toward precision medicine and personalized medicine. And that is the wave of the future.
It's a miracle.
It is. As the doctors are able to make a diagnosis, then that treatment is going to be more specialized and specific to that person for their makeup of their body, for their age, for their weight, for their amount of resistance.
And is 21st century cures looking at protections for that information? Because if all of a sudden that information leaks out, you're maybe at more high risk for this, it could impact you later on.
Exactly, and that is going to drive another debate which will be secondary to all of this, and secondary also to the data security legislation that Congressman Welch and I are moving through. And that is your health information and who owns that health information. So many individuals are now saying, look, I don't want the insurance company or the doctor owning that information. When you talk about all the information about you, everything that is online, that is your virtual presence. I call it the virtual you.
Literally.
Yes. And you want to make certain that you're the one that's the keeper of the keys on that information, and you control who has access to it, whether it's a read-only file, a one-time use, but you do not want the physician or the insurance company or anybody else capturing and holding that but you, and then you allow the use.
And you speak about having that information online. As you know, Charter Communications is part of an industry that delivers internet services. We have many partners, Comcast and others, and there's been a very significant debate about what has been called net neutrality. That's the term that is used in the vernacular.
A misnomer.
Okay, so I understand that you have been a strong advocate for a certain position as it relates to what I'll call net neutrality. What can you tell us?
That's exactly right. Net neutrality is a misnomer. It is a net not so neutral, and basically it's the fairness doctrine for the internet. Here's what this Federal Communications Commission is doing with net neutrality. They are taking the internet, which has been an information service, and governments had a hands-off. You know, we came up with the internet, let's go in here and let's make certain that we keep our hands off of it, let innovation take place. Now, Chairman Wheeler and this activist FCC has decided, okay, we're going to reclassify it as a telecommunications service, subject it to rules that were put in place in 1938, and then we're going to tax it and regulate it. What this does is allow the FCC to assign priority and value to content. Very much opposed to net neutrality. I have the Internet Freedom Act. I've been joined by many members of Congress. There's bipartisan opposition to what they're trying to do with the FCC.
And I think there's some confusion on this very issue. This doesn't have to do with sales tax for products you may buy on the internet.
No.
That's a separate issue that's already been handled. This has to do with the alleged somehow...
Take your telephone bill and look at your telephone bill and your cable bill, and you see all of, you're paying for your tier of service, and then you get into this list of taxes, which is 5 or 6 different little fees and taxes, and you're going, what is this for? That's what they're wanting to do now to your internet service. So in addition to your telephone service and to your cable service, your internet service, which has just been the access for what you wanted.
That's the key.
That now you're going to have a list of taxes that will be there.
So what can you tell us about the success or potential success of the Internet Freedom Act? Because we know, like you said, the FCC has ruled. Legislation can come down, but it could be in the courts. It is in the courts. What can you tell us?
What I can tell you is that we are continuing to fight it. The courts have already ruled against the FCC. And that was done 3 years ago when we filed the Internet Freedom Act. What we will do is, through the appropriations process, block the FCC from spending some of the money that is used to implement net neutrality rules. And we also will block their push to give away control of the internet with ICANN and with IANA.
Her name is Marsha Blackburn. She is a member of the U.S. Congress representing the state of Tennessee. My name is Brad Pomerance. You are watching Charter Local Edition.